The Galactic Defense Council chamber buzzed with the familiar sounds of different species communicating. Clicks, whistles, and electronic translations filled the air as representatives from 12 different worlds gathered around the massive circular table. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed tactical positions across the contested Omega sector. Commander Zeth Ka of the Vorthan Empire stood at nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-scaled skin gleaming under the chamber's bright lights. His 4 eyes moved independently as he studied the battlefield data, occasionally making dismissive clicking sounds with his forked tongue. The Vorthans had dominated galactic warfare for over 2 centuries with their plasma cannons and energy shields. The human contingent requests permission to deploy their sniper teams, announced Secretary General Mira Thornfield, the only human representative in the room. Her voice carried across the chamber through the translation system, causing several species to emit what could only be described as laughter. General Krex 9 of the Metallic Collective wheezed through his vocal processors. His cybernetic body, more machine than organic, sparked with amusement. Snipers? Those primitive kinetic weapons the humans still use? How quaint. The Zephyrian delegate, Ambassador Veltar, fluttered his insectoid wings in what his species considered polite mockery. Secretary Thornfield, with respect to your species, we face the Drakhar swarm. These are not target ranges on your homeworld. The enemy possesses personal energy barriers, adaptive armor, and quantum displacement fields. Your metal projectiles would be ineffective. Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She had served as Earth's representative for 3 years now, and these dismissive attitudes toward human military capabilities were nothing new. The other species viewed humanity as the galactic equivalent of children playing with sticks, while adults wielded plasma rifles. Our sniper teams have proven effective in previous engagements, Mira replied calmly. The Battle of Kepler Station, the defense of New Geneva, the minor skirmishes against pirates and raiders, interrupted Commander Zeth Ka. His main eyes focused on her while his secondary pair continued studying the tactical display. The Drakhar swarm is different. They are a true military force with advanced technology. Your kinetic weapons are museum pieces. Supreme Marshal Quintal of the Ethereal Coalition spoke for the first time, her translucent form shimmering slightly. Perhaps we should allow the humans to participate in a supporting role. Their enthusiasm is admirable, even if their equipment is outdated. The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, even through the translation matrix. Mira gritted her teeth. Earth had been part of the Galactic Defense Council for only 15 years, making them the newest and least respected member. Their technology was indeed different. No energy weapons, no plasma shields, no quantum computers. But different didn't mean inferior. Our forces are already in position, Mira said, pulling up her own tactical display. Sniper Team Alpha and Sniper Team Bravo are deployed on elevated positions overlooking the Drakhar advance routes. They're ready to provide overwatch and elimination of high-value targets. Captain Xeris of the Plasma Corps, a being that appeared to be made entirely of condensed energy, flickered with amusement. Overwatch with kinetic projectiles? Against enemies with personal shields and adaptive armor? This should be entertaining. The other delegates shared what passed for chuckles among their respective species. Even the usually serious crystalline representatives seemed to resonate with amusement, creating a soft musical tone that filled the chamber. Very well, announced Supreme Marshal Quintal. Human forces may participate. However, they will operate under strict communication protocols. We cannot have their primitive tactics interfering with our coordinated plasma strikes and quantum bombardments. Mira nodded stiffly. Understood. Our teams will maintain radio silence unless they have critical intelligence to report. As the meeting continued, the various military leaders began coordinating their advanced weapon systems. The Vorthans would deploy their particle beam artillery. The metallic collective would use their guided missile platforms. The Zephyrians planned to utilize their sonic disruptors. The ethereal coalition would provide quantum interference fields. Meanwhile, hidden in their positions 3 kilometers from the main battle lines, Sniper Team Alpha and Sniper Team Bravo prepared their equipment with quiet professionalism. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his scope one final time, the familiar weight of his rifle comforting against his shoulder. Beside him, his spotter Corporal Sarah Chen scanned the alien landscape through her binoculars, noting wind patterns and environmental factors that would affect their shots. "Command thinks we're playing with toy guns," Rodriguez murmured into his throat microphone. "Let them think that," Chen replied softly. "Underestimation is its own kind of weapon." 3 kilometers away, Sniper Team Bravo, Sergeant David Park and Corporal Emma Johnson, settled into their own hide position among the rocky outcroppings. Their rifles were nearly identical to Alpha Team's, but each weapon had been customized for its operator's preferences and mission requirements. The human sniper rifles looked primitive compared to the gleaming energy weapons of the other species. They were mechanical, using chemical propellants to fire metal projectiles. No glowing plasma, no quantum calculations, no energy shields. Just precision engineering, human craftsmanship, and the steady hands of trained marksmen. "Movement on the horizon," reported Johnson, her eye pressed to her spotting scope. "Drakkar advance units, approximately 4 kilometers out." The Drakkar swarm had been expanding across this sector for months, consuming planets and resources with mechanical efficiency. They were a species that had abandoned biological form centuries ago, existing now as consciousness transferred into mechanical bodies of incredible durability and adaptability. Through her scope, Johnson could see the first Drakkar units cresting the ridgeline. They moved with the fluid grace of advanced machinery, their forms shifting and adapting to the terrain as they advanced. Each unit stood roughly 9 feet tall, with multiple limbs ending in various tool and weapon attachments. "Confirm visual on Drakkar advance elements," Park whispered into his radio. "They're wearing some kind of energy shielding. Looks like personal deflector fields." The information was relayed back to the main command center, where it was processed by the various alien commanders. The news only reinforced their belief that kinetic weapons would be useless against such advanced defenses. "Deflector fields confirmed," announced General Krex 9 to the assembled commanders. "Our plasma weapons will need to cycle through multiple frequencies to penetrate their adaptive shielding. The human kinetic projectiles will simply bounce off harmlessly." But the human snipers weren't concerned with the energy shields. They had encountered similar technology before, and they had learned something that their galactic allies had never bothered to consider. Every defense had weaknesses, and sometimes the oldest solutions worked against the newest problems. As the Drakkar forces moved closer, the main alien battle lines prepared their sophisticated weapons. Plasma generators hummed to life, quantum computers calculated firing solutions, and energy shields powered up to protect the galactic forces. The humans waited in silence, watching through their scopes as the enemy approached the engagement range for energy weapons. They could see the Drakkar units clearly now, mechanical beings with adaptive armor and personal energy shields, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. "All stations, this is command," came the voice of Supreme Marshal Quintal through the communication network. "Drakkar forces are now within optimal firing range. Commence bombardment in 30 seconds. The countdown began, marking the start of what the galactic commanders expected to be a standard engagement. Energy weapons against energy shields, advanced technology versus advanced technology, the kind of warfare that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. But high on their hidden positions, the human snipers were counting down to something entirely different. They had spent weeks studying Drakkar technology, analyzing their shield patterns, and calculating the precise angles needed for their shots to be effective. 10 seconds to engagement," announced command. Rodriguez and Park both took deep breaths, slowing their heart rates and steadying their aim. Their spotters made final wind calculations and range confirmations. 4 rifles were now aimed at carefully selected targets among the advancing Drakkar forces. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, commence fire! The alien weapons erupted in a spectacular display of energy and light. Plasma beams streaked across the battlefield, quantum missiles traced impossible paths through space-time, and sonic disruptors sent waves of destructive sound toward the enemy lines. The Drakkar responded immediately, their energy shields flaring to life and their adaptive armor shifting to absorb and deflect the incoming attacks. The battle had begun exactly as expected. Energy weapons against energy defenses, technology against technology. But in that same moment, 4 carefully aimed shots rang out from positions 3 kilometers away. The sound was almost lost in the chaos of energy weapons fire, just the sharp crack of chemical propellants and the whistle of metal projectiles cutting through alien air. The bullets traveled at supersonic speeds, following ballistic trajectories calculated with precision that would have impressed the quantum computers of the galactic forces. They weren't aimed at the energy shields or the adaptive armor. Instead, they targeted the tiny gaps where mechanical joints met, the small sensor arrays that protruded beyond the protective fields, and the vulnerable power coupling that fed energy to the shield generators. The first shot struck a Drakkar unit commander in the optical sensor cluster, shattering the delicate instruments that allowed it to coordinate its squad's movements. The second shot severed a power cable that fed the shield generator of another unit, causing its protective field to collapse instantly. The third and fourth shots found their marks with equal precision, one disabling a communications array, another penetrating the joint between 2 armor plates to damage critical internal systems. All 4 targeted Drakkar units stumbled or fell, their coordination disrupted and their defenses compromised. But in the chaos of the energy weapons battle, none of the galactic commanders noticed the effect of the human sniper fire. "Minimal effect from initial bombardment," reported General Krex 9. "Drakkar shields are adapting faster than anticipated. Recommend increasing plasma frequency modulation." The battle continued with the alien forces adjusting their energy weapons to overcome the Drakkar defenses. Plasma beams changed colors as their frequencies shifted. Quantum missiles recalculated their approach vectors, and sonic disruptors modulated their acoustic signatures. Meanwhile, the human snipers reloaded and acquired new targets. They had learned something important in that first exchange. Their bullets could indeed penetrate Drakkar defenses, but only if they targeted the right spots with perfect precision. "Switching to high-value targets," Rodriguez whispered to his spotter. Through his scope, he could see a larger Drakkar unit that appeared to be directing the movements of several smaller ones. Its energy shield was stronger than the others, but Rodriguez had noticed something that the energy weapon operators couldn't see from their positions. The command unit's shield generator created a small gap in coverage directly above its head, probably to allow for better sensor reception. It was a tiny opening, maybe 6 inches in diameter, and it was 3.5 kilometers away. For an energy weapon, such a small target would be impossible to hit precisely. But for a skilled sniper with the right rifle and ammunition, it was just another challenging shot. Rodriguez adjusted his scope for the extreme range and calculated the trajectory needed to thread the bullet through that small gap. His spotter confirmed wind speed and direction. The shot would require perfect timing and flawless execution. "Target acquired," Rodriguez whispered, preparing for long-range precision shot. As the energy weapons battle raged below, the human snipers prepared to prove that sometimes the oldest weapons were the most effective, not because they were primitive, but because they approached the problem from an angle that advanced defenses weren't designed to handle. The Drakkar had energy shields to stop energy weapons, adaptive armor to absorb energy blasts, and quantum displacement fields to avoid quantum attacks. But they had no specific defenses against high-velocity metal projectiles fired from extreme range with pinpoint accuracy. And the galactic commanders, focused on their sophisticated energy weapon exchanges, had no idea that the real battle was being fought by two human sniper teams with rifles that their alien allies considered museum pieces. The stage was set for a demonstration that would challenge everything the galactic military establishment believed about advanced warfare. Rodriguez's finger found the trigger as he held his breath. Through his scope, the Drakkar command unit moved with mechanical precision, coordinating the movements of its subordinate forces through the small gap in its energy shield. The distance was extreme even by sniper standards, 3.5 kilometers through alien atmosphere with unknown wind conditions. "Wind steady, 2 clicks left," Chen whispered, her eye never leaving her spotting scope. "Atmospheric density appears nominal. Target is stationary for coordination sequence." The shot rang out like thunder in the stillness of their hide position. The bullet streaked through the air in a perfect arc, covering the distance in just over 3 seconds. It threaded through the tiny gap in the energy shield as if guided by some impossible force and struck the command unit's primary processing center. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Drakkar command unit convulsed as its coordination systems failed, sending conflicting signals to the dozen units under its control. What had been an organized advance formation suddenly became a chaotic mess of confused mechanical beings stumbling into each other. "Direct hit on command unit," Park reported from his position. "Enemy formation integrity compromised." But the galactic commanders were too focused on their energy weapon exchanges to notice the disruption in the Drakkar ranks. They were still trying to penetrate the adaptive armor with increasingly complex plasma modulations and quantum calculations. "Drakkar forces are maintaining cohesion despite our bombardment," reported Captain Zaris. "Recommend deploying antimatter charges." Supreme Marshal Quintal's translucent form shimmered with frustration. "Negative. Antimatter weapons would create too much collateral damage. Continue with Plasma Barrage Sequence 7 Alpha." 3 kilometers away, Johnson had spotted something that would change the entire battle dynamic. Through her powerful spotting scope, she could see a massive Drakkar unit moving up from the rear, easily 3 times the size of the standard units, bristling with weapon arrays and coordination equipment. "We've got a heavy command unit moving into position," she reported quietly to Park. "Looks like their battlefield commander." Park swung his rifle to acquire the target, his scope revealing details that would have been invisible to the energy weapon operators. The massive Drakkar unit was indeed a field commander, its body housing the quantum processing equipment needed to coordinate hundreds of smaller units across a wide battlefield. But like all Drakkar technology, it had been designed to defend against energy weapons. Its shields were tuned to deflect plasma and particle beams. Its armor was designed to absorb and redistribute energy attacks. Its quantum displacement field could avoid guided missiles and energy projectiles. What it couldn't defend against was a carefully placed kinetic projectile fired with perfect precision. Park studied the target through his scope, noting the complex array of sensors and communication equipment that protruded from the main body. The energy shield covered most of the unit, but there were small gaps where the equipment needed unobstructed access to the battlefield. "Range to target, 4.2 kilometers, Johnson whispered. "Target is moving slowly, consistent bearing, wind conditions stable." It was an extremely difficult shot even for a master sniper. The target was small, distant, and partially protected. But Park had trained for shots like this his entire career, and his rifle was specifically designed for extreme long-range precision work. He made minute adjustments to his scope and calculated the trajectory needed for the bullet to reach its target. The shot would require the projectile to travel in a precise arc that would bring it down into one of the small gaps in the shield coverage. "Firing," Park whispered. The bullet left his rifle with a sharp crack and began its long journey toward the Drakkar commander. It flew in a perfect parabolic arc, reaching an altitude of nearly 300 meters before beginning its descent toward the target. 4.3 seconds later, the bullet struck the field commander's primary communication array, shattering the delicate quantum components that allowed it to coordinate the entire Drakkar force. The effect rippled across the battlefield like a wave. Hundreds of Drakkar units suddenly found themselves without central coordination, their individual artificial intelligences confused and uncertain. Some units stopped moving entirely. Others began executing outdated commands. A few started moving in circles as their navigation systems tried to re-establish contact with their command structure. But still, the galactic commanders didn't notice. They were completely absorbed in their energy weapon tactics, trying to break through Drakkar defenses with increasingly sophisticated technological solutions. Plasma effectiveness remains minimal, reported General Krex 9. Drakkar adaptive armor is learning faster than we can modify our frequency patterns. Perhaps we should consider gravitational weapons, suggested Ambassador Veltar. Their shields may not be calibrated for gravitational distortion. While the alien commanders debated their next technological escalation, the human snipers continued their methodical elimination of key Drakkar targets. They had identified a pattern in the enemy formation: communication relays, power distribution nodes, and coordination centers that kept the mechanical army functioning as a cohesive force. New targets, Chen reported to Rodriguez. I'm seeing what looks like mobile power stations moving up to support their front lines. Rodriguez shifted his aim to study the targets his spotter had identified. They were indeed power stations, large Drakkar units designed to provide energy to smaller combat units whose internal power sources were running low. Destroying them would force the combat units to retreat or risk complete power failure. But the power stations were heavily shielded, with multiple layers of energy protection and adaptive armor. To the energy weapon operators, they would appear virtually invulnerable. However, Rodriguez could see something that the energy weapons couldn't target: the physical connection points where power cables linked the stations to the combat units. These connection points were small, heavily armored, but they had to remain outside the energy shields to function properly. They were perfect targets for precision kinetic weapons. Targeting power distribution nodes, Rodriguez whispered. Distance 3.8 kilometers. His first shot severed the power cable connecting a mobile station to a squad of combat units. The cable sparked and failed, immediately cutting power to 6 Drakkar fighters. His second shot hit another connection point, disabling power to an entire section of the enemy line. Team Bravo followed suit, with Park and Johnson targeting similar infrastructure elements in their sector. Within minutes, nearly a quarter of the Drakkar force had lost external power support, forcing many units to begin retreat procedures to preserve their internal power reserves. The alien formation began to show serious gaps as powered-down Drakkar units withdrew from the battlefield. But the galactic commanders, still focused on their energy weapon exchanges, interpreted this as a tactical withdrawal rather than the result of infrastructure destruction. Drakkar forces appear to be regrouping, announced Supreme Marshal Quintal. Maintain bombardment pressure. Don't let them establish new defensive positions. The energy weapons intensified their fire, sending brilliant streams of plasma and quantum explosions across the battlefield. The display was spectacular, but it was hitting mostly empty ground as the Drakkar units continued their unplanned retreat due to power loss. Meanwhile, the human snipers had identified their next set of targets, the shield generators that protected the remaining heavy Drakkar units. These generators were powerful enough to deflect even the most sophisticated energy weapons, but they required external cooling systems to prevent overheating during sustained combat. The cooling systems were small, precisely engineered, and completely vulnerable to kinetic attack. Johnson spotted the first target through her scope. Shield generator cooling system, bearing 270, range 4 kilometers. Target is stationary but small. Park studied the target carefully. The cooling system was indeed small, maybe the size of a briefcase, and it was protected only by light armor plating. A single well-placed shot would cause the system to overheat, forcing the shield generator to shut down automatically to prevent catastrophic failure. "Shot taken," Park reported quietly. His bullet struck the cooling system dead center, rupturing the heat exchange mechanisms and causing immediate thermal cascade failure. The massive shield that had been protecting an entire squad of heavy Drakkar units flickered and died, leaving them exposed to the alien energy weapons for the first time in the battle. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Galactic Force's plasma weapons, which had been ineffective against the shields, now struck the unprotected Drakkar units with full force. Mechanical bodies that had seemed invulnerable moments before were suddenly melting under the concentrated energy barrage. "Breakthrough!" announced Captain Zaris. "Enemy shields in Sector 7 have failed. Concentrating fire on exposed targets." The alien commanders assumed their energy weapons had finally overcome the Drakkar defenses through superior technology. They had no way of knowing that a single kinetic projectile fired from 4 kilometers away had done what all their sophisticated weapons could not. Rodriguez and his team targeted another shield generator cooling system, then another. Each successful shot brought down protective barriers that had been deflecting millions of credits worth of energy weapons fire. The battlefield began to shift decisively in favor of the Galactic forces, but the Drakkar were not finished. Their artificial intelligence networks quickly analyzed the pattern of shield failures and mechanical breakdowns. Within minutes, they had identified the source of their problems: long-range kinetic weapons fire from elevated positions beyond the main battle lines. "Movement in the enemy rear," Chen reported urgently. "Looks like they're deploying scout units to investigate our position." Through her binoculars, she could see small, fast-moving Drakkar units breaking away from the main formation and heading directly toward the human sniper positions. These scouts were designed for reconnaissance and counter-sniper operations, equipped with advanced sensors and light but effective armor. "They've figured out we're here," Rodriguez said grimly. "How long before they reach our position?" "At their current speed, maybe 15 minutes, Chen calculated. But they're spreading out. Looks like they're trying to triangulate both our positions simultaneously." Park and Johnson were facing the same problem. The Drakkar scouts were approaching their hide position with mechanical determination, their sensors scanning for signs of the kinetic weapon operators who had been systematically destroying their infrastructure. "We need to relocate," Johnson advised. "These positions are about to be compromised." But Park was studying something through his scope that made him hesitate. In the confusion of the shield failures and power outages, a new Drakkar unit had appeared on the battlefield, something larger and more sophisticated than anything they had seen before. "Wait," he said quietly. "I'm seeing what looks like a field repair unit. Massive thing, probably designed to fix all the damage we've been causing." Through his scope, Park could see the new unit deploying multiple repair arms and sending small maintenance drones toward the damaged shield generators and power systems. If it succeeded in repairing the infrastructure they had spent the last hour destroying, the battle would swing back in favor of the Drakkar. "Range to target?" he asked Johnson. 4.7 kilometers, she replied after a moment with her laser rangefinder. "That's extreme range, even for us." It was indeed an extremely difficult shot, the maximum effective range of their rifles under ideal conditions. The target was large but heavily armored, moving constantly as it deployed its repair systems, and protected by multiple layers of defensive technology. But Park could see something that the energy weapon operators couldn't. The repair unit's central control processor was housed in a small, lightly armored module that had to remain exposed to coordinate the various repair operations. It was a tiny target at nearly 5 kilometers distance, but it was the key to preventing the Drakkar from recovering from the infrastructure damage the human snipers had inflicted. "Taking the shot," Park announced, despite the approaching scout units and the extreme range. As he lined up the most difficult shot of his career, the battle hung in balance. The galactic commanders were celebrating their apparent technological victory, unaware that their success depended entirely on two human snipers with rifles that the alien military establishment considered primitive and obsolete. The next few minutes would determine whether the galaxy's faith in advanced energy weapons was justified or whether the oldest military technology known to humanity was still the most effective tool for winning battles. Park's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm as he lined up the impossible shot. 4.7 kilometers to a target smaller than his fist, with Drakkar scout units closing on his position and the entire battle depending on this single bullet finding its mark. The repair unit moved with mechanical precision, its multiple arms working to restore the damaged shield generators and power systems. Park could see through his scope that it had already begun repairing one of the cooling systems Johnson had destroyed earlier. In minutes, that shield would be operational again. "Wind steady, minimal thermal distortion," Johnson whispered. Her eye pressed to her spotting scope even as she tracked the approaching scout units with her peripheral vision. "You've got maybe 2 minutes before we have to move." The central control processor was a difficult target under the best conditions. At this extreme range, it required perfect calculation of trajectory, windage, and atmospheric conditions. But Park had trained for shots like this his entire military career, and his rifle had been handcrafted for exactly this kind of precision work. He made a minute adjustment to his scope and took a deep breath. Through the crosshairs, he could see the small control module directing the repair operations with mechanical efficiency. One shot to disable it, and the entire repair operation would collapse. The trigger broke cleanly under his finger pressure, and the bullet began its 5-second journey toward the target. It flew in a perfect parabolic arc, reaching an altitude of over 400 meters before beginning its descent toward the Drakkar repair unit. The bullet struck the control processor dead center, shattering the delicate components that coordinated the repair operations. The massive unit convulsed as its systems failed, its repair arms freezing in mid-operation, and its maintenance drones falling to the ground like dead insects. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. The damaged shield generators that had been moments away from restoration remained offline. The severed power cables stayed disconnected. The cooling systems continued to leak coolant across the alien landscape. But there was no time to celebrate the successful shot. The Drakkar scouts were now less than 500 meters from both sniper positions and closing fast. "Time to move," Johnson said urgently. "We've got multiple contacts approaching from 3 directions." Park and Johnson began their tactical withdrawal, carrying their rifles and essential equipment as they relocated to a secondary position 2 kilometers away. The movement was risky. They would be exposed and vulnerable during the relocation, but staying in a compromised position would mean certain capture or destruction. 3 kilometers away, Rodriguez and Chen were facing the same situation. The Drakkar scouts had triangulated their position with mechanical precision and were approaching from multiple angles to prevent escape. "Moving to fallback position Alpha," Rodriguez reported quietly into his radio. "We'll attempt to maintain overwatch during relocation." The withdrawal was a carefully choreographed dance of tactical movement and concealment. The human snipers had trained for exactly this scenario, maintaining effectiveness while under pressure from counter-sniper operations. But as they moved, something unexpected happened on the main battlefield. The galactic commanders, flush with their apparent success in penetrating Drakkar defenses, decided to press their advantage with a massive coordinated assault. "All units prepare for final bombardment sequence," announced Supreme Marshal Quintal. "We will overwhelm their remaining defenses with concentrated fire from all weapon systems." The alien forces prepared their most devastating attacks. Plasma cannons charged to maximum power. Quantum missile systems armed their most sophisticated warheads. Sonic disruptors calibrated for maximum destructive resonance. But what the galactic commanders didn't realize was that their target assessment was completely wrong. They believed they had successfully defeated the Drakkar technology through superior energy weapons. In reality, the enemy defenses had been systematically dismantled by kinetic weapons that the alien military considered primitive. The massive bombardment was about to be unleashed against an enemy force that was already crippled and defenseless. "Commence final assault," ordered Supreme Marshal Quintal. The combined firepower of 12 different species erupted across the battlefield in a spectacular display of energy and destruction. Plasma beams carved through the air like brilliant swords. Quantum explosions tore holes in space-time itself. Sonic waves shattered the ground and filled the air with devastating frequencies. The remaining Drakkar forces, already weakened by the systematic destruction of their infrastructure, had no chance against the concentrated assault. Units that had survived the sniper attacks were vaporized instantly. Mechanical bodies that had seemed invincible hours before were reduced to molten metal and shattered components. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Drakkar force was completely destroyed. "Complete victory!" announced General Krex 9. "Enemy forces eliminated with minimal casualties to our own units." The alien commanders congratulated themselves on their tactical brilliance and technological superiority. They had proven once again that advanced energy weapons could overcome any defense through sheer sophistication and firepower. But high in their new positions, the human snipers knew the truth. The battle had been won not by energy weapons, but by 4 rifles firing metal projectiles with perfect precision. Every critical system failure, every shield collapse, every communication breakdown had been the result of carefully placed kinetic rounds targeting vulnerable points that energy weapons couldn't reach. "Sniper Team Alpha report status," came the voice of Secretary General Thornfield through their communication system. "Alpha Team operational," Rodriguez replied. "Relocated to secondary position. No casualties." "Bravo Team operational," Park added. "Mission successful. Enemy infrastructure neutralized." Back in the command center, the alien commanders were analyzing the battle data and celebrating their technological triumph. The energy weapons had performed exactly as expected once the enemy defenses had mysteriously failed. "Fascinating," mused Commander Zethka as he studied the tactical recordings. "The Drakkar shields began failing in a pattern we haven't seen before, almost as if they were being targeted systematically." "Probably a cascade failure in their defensive networks," suggested General Krex 9. "Our plasma frequency modulation may have found a resonance weakness in their shield generators." Captain Zaris flickered with satisfaction. "The important thing is that our energy weapons proved decisive. As expected, advanced technology overcame primitive defenses." But Ambassador Veltar was studying the data more carefully, his compound eyes noting details that the others had missed. "There's something unusual in the timing of these failures. They don't correlate directly with our energy weapon impacts." "What do you mean?" asked Supreme Marshal Quintal. Veltar manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the moments when critical Drakkar systems had failed. "Look at the temporal sequence. Shield failures, power outages, communication breakdowns, they all occurred slightly before our energy weapons reached optimal effectiveness." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the system failures hadn't been caused by energy weapons, then what had caused them? "Perhaps we should review the human sniper team reports," suggested Secretary General Thornfield quietly. The alien commanders exchanged glances that, despite their different facial structures, all conveyed the same emotion: reluctance to admit they might have overlooked something important. "Very well," said Supreme Marshal Quintal after a long pause. "Display the human engagement reports." The holographic display shifted to show the detailed logs from both sniper teams: shot times, target descriptions, ammunition expended, effects observed. The data painted a very different picture of the battle than what the energy weapon operators had experienced. "Impossible," breathed Commander Zethka as he studied the reports. These readings suggest that kinetic projectiles penetrated Drakkar energy shields and adaptive armor. Must be an error in the human recording systems, dismissed General Krex 9. Kinetic weapons cannot be effective against advanced defensive technology. But the data was undeniable. Every major system failure in the Drakkar forces correlated exactly with reported sniper shots. Shield generators disabled by cooling system destruction. Power networks severed by targeted cable strikes. Command and control eliminated by precision shots to vulnerable components. Request permission to interview the human sniper teams, said Veltar thoughtfully. 20 minutes later, Rodriguez, Chen, Park, and Johnson stood in the Galactic Command Center, still wearing their camouflage gear and carrying their rifles. The contrast between their simple equipment and the sophisticated technology surrounding them was stark. "Explain your targeting methodology," requested Commander Zethka, his 4 eyes focusing intently on the humans. Rodriguez stepped forward. "We studied the enemy technology and identified critical vulnerabilities that weren't protected by energy shields or adaptive armor. Cooling systems, power connections, sensor arrays, communication equipment, components that had to remain exposed to function properly. But our scans indicated that Drakkar defenses were impervious to kinetic weapons," protested Captain Zaris. "Your scans were correct," Chen replied calmly. "Their shields could stop our bullets easily, so we didn't shoot at the shields. We shot around them, through gaps, at components that couldn't be fully protected." Park opened a detailed tactical map on his portable computer. "Every defensive system has weaknesses. Energy shields need power sources. Adaptive armor needs sensor input. Command systems need communication arrays. We targeted the support infrastructure rather than the primary defenses." The alien commanders studied the human tactical analysis with growing amazement. It was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to overcome advanced defenses with more advanced weapons, the humans had simply avoided the defenses entirely by targeting unprotected components. "Your projectile weapons achieved precision strikes at ranges exceeding 4.5 kilometers, observed Veltar. "How is this possible without quantum guidance systems?" Johnson smiled slightly. "Ballistic calculation, environmental analysis, and steady hands. Our rifles use mechanical precision rather than computer guidance. They're reliable, accurate, and they don't show up on enemy sensors as technological threats." The realization hit the Galactic commanders like a physical blow. Throughout the battle, they had been focused on sophisticated technological solutions, advanced energy weapons, complex targeting systems, quantum computers calculating firing solutions. Meanwhile, the humans had achieved decisive results with weapons that operated on principles unchanged for centuries. "The Drakkar never detected your weapons," mused Supreme Marshal Quintal. "Their sensors were calibrated for energy signatures and quantum emissions. Chemical propellants and kinetic projectiles were below their detection threshold." "That's exactly right," Rodriguez confirmed. "They built their defenses to stop energy weapons, particle beams, and guided missiles. Nobody told them to watch out for bullets." The command center fell into stunned silence as the implications became clear. The most devastating military victory in recent galactic history had been achieved not through technological superiority, but through tactical thinking and precision marksmanship with weapons the alien species considered obsolete. "This changes everything," whispered General Krex 9. "If kinetic weapons can defeat advanced defenses through precision targeting, perhaps," suggested Secretary General Thornfield diplomatically, "there's value in combining different approaches. Energy weapons for direct assault, kinetic weapons for precision strikes against critical infrastructure." Commander Zethka studied the human snipers with new respect. "These rifles of yours, are they representative of human military capability?" "These are just the long-range precision instruments," Park replied. We have kinetic weapons for every tactical situation: close combat, medium range, area suppression, explosive ordnance. They're all mechanical, reliable, and invisible to most advanced sensors. The alien commanders exchanged looks of dawning comprehension. They had been so focused on advancing their energy weapon technology that they had completely overlooked the tactical advantages of simpler systems. "We formally request," announced Supreme Marshal Quintal, "that human forces be integrated into all future galactic defense operations. Your unique capabilities appear to be highly effective against technological threats." Rodriguez nodded respectfully. "We'd be honored to serve alongside the galactic forces. But next time, maybe don't assume our equipment is primitive just because it doesn't glow or make humming sounds." The laughter that followed was nervous, but genuine. The galaxy's military establishment had just learned a valuable lesson about the danger of technological arrogance and the enduring effectiveness of well-applied fundamentals. As the human snipers left the command center, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders, the alien commanders began the difficult process of reconsidering everything they thought they knew about military effectiveness. Sometimes the oldest solutions really were the best solutions, not because they were primitive, but because they approached problems from directions that advanced defenses never anticipated. The galaxy had just rediscovered the power of thinking like a human.